Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and 100% battery health has changed this year. Can it be done long term? Well, technically no, not 100%, but we'll talk about some tips and more based off of battery health and what you should do. And this year, battery health isn't the same for me with the iPhone 14 Pro Max compared to previous years. Ever since the first time Apple included battery health statistics on iPhone, and at this time of the year, I have always had 100%. August of every year is typically when I'll have 100%, and then it might drop after that. This year, though, is not the same, and nothing has changed for me as far as environment, charging, or a usage standpoint. Last year with the iPhone 13 Pro Max, it took 318 days to drop from 100% to 99%. On December 14th, 2022, just 89 days after I started using iPhone 14 Pro Max, it dropped to 99% battery health after just 60 cycles of the battery. And there's really nothing you can do to keep the battery health at 100% forever. Just replacing the battery over and over will do that. Now I have two phones here with the exact same charging that were used previous years back to back. I used the 13 Pro Max as my main phone when it was released from day one until the iPhone 14 Pro Max was released. So I've used both of these phones 100% of the time as my main phone. And there are two major contributing factors to battery health, which are heat and how many cycles, and of course there's other factors as well. But let's first talk about overall cycles of the battery, and then we'll talk about what you can do to keep your battery health even better. We'll check battery health on both devices currently and how many cycles they have now. Now, according to Apple, iPhone has a battery that is designed to maintain 80% of its battery health after 500 cycles, which is about 2 years for the average user. Of course, that can vary depending on if you're playing a ton of games, if you don't have any other devices, your overall environment, and much more. A cycle is any combination of charging and discharging to a full capacity of the battery one time. This can be done between multiple charges or all at once depending on usage. For example, if you charge to 100% and then use it until it reaches 0%, then that would count as one full cycle. However, if you charge from 50 to 100% one day, that would be half a cycle. Then the next day you do the same and use 50%, that would equal one cycle. And that would take 2 days. It can be any combination equaling 100% of the battery capacity, 80% one day, 20% the next, and so on. And the cycling of the battery naturally degrades battery chemistry over time. So until someone finds a new way to make a battery, this will always be the case. Now, as far as the other contributing factors, well, heat is a major factor. And the first tip is you want to remove any cases if you're in a very hot environment. So if you're in a very warm environment and you're really seeing the phone heat up because you're charging it or anything else, you may want to consider removing the case to help it dissipate heat more readily. However, when it's time to put a case back on, that's where today's sponsor comes in, CaseQ. This is the CaseQ Magic Stand case. It comes in clear, space black, and there are new clear purple and clear black cases too. It's a protective case that adds grip and looks great. And it also has raised bezels around the screen and camera, but also has a hidden stand built in. The stand allows for a 40 to 120 degree angle and has a magnet in the ring of the stand that supports MagSafe accessories and charging. I really like the overall look of these cases. They're protective, they accent the phone nicely, and of course this stand makes them super convenient. Be sure to check them out in the description below, and I'll also link a discount code, so be sure to check there as well. Now, as far as heat for your device, that is a major contributing factor, and this year it's been hotter than ever as far as the summer is concerned, and battery chemistry in general, as far as lithium-ion batteries in your iPhone, don't really like to be in super hot temperatures. It can make them degrade more quickly. According to Apple, the operating temperature that's optimal is 62 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 to 22 degrees Celsius. The iPhone is designed to work within 32 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 to 35 Celsius ambient temperatures. And the iPhone actually has sensors in it to keep the temperatures down by either cutting charging power if it's charging, or slowing the processor to keep the phone cool as needed, dimming the display, and much more. Also, MagSafe chargers in general have temperature sensors built in to help do the same, making sure that it stays at the optimal temperature. We'll talk about charging in just a moment. Now, as I said early on, there's been no difference as far as how I've charged my phone, how I've used my phone, where I've actually used it as far as the environment and more. My overall temperature, where my phone normally is about 70 to 73 degrees Fahrenheit, or 21 to 22.7 Celsius. So it's typically in a fairly cool environment unless I'm filming outside. And if we take a look at my settings, We'll go down to battery, and under battery health, I'm down to 90% battery health. This is much lower than I've ever seen before. Like I said, I haven't seen it drop below 100 typically until late August. So this is a little bit different for me, and that includes every iPhone going back to the first one that has battery health included. If we take a look at last year's iPhone, you'll see if we go into settings, do the same thing with the 13 Pro Max in Sierra Blue, battery health and charging is at 98%. That's after a full year of use, then switching once the 14 Pro Max was released. Now, if we plug this in and take a look at how many cycles there are, that can be a big contributing factor. So we plug the phone in, and you can see this has 231 cycles as far as the battery is concerned. So not too bad for an entire year, since Apple says 500 cycles for 2 years, down to 80%. So this is doing much better than average. The other phone, my 14 Pro Max, is a different story. If we plug this in, you can see that it has 259 cycles. So 92% battery health according to Coconut Battery. It's a third-party app outside of the App Store on a Mac, and I'll leave a link to that if you want to check it out. But this has 259 cycles. So we've got more cycles than we did with the 13 Pro Max, and it degraded more quickly. There could be a couple different contributing factors to that. One of them could be that the beta software is much worse this year, using iOS 16 being more taxing on the battery. Additionally, it could be the always-on display. Some people have actually suggested that, where the always-on display is just using a ton of different battery. And if we go over to my battery life, you can see what's actually using it, where the phone used some of it yesterday, but the home and lock screen typically uses the most amount of battery for me. Sometimes mail, but that's pretty minimal, and from day to day, it varies, of course, depending on what you're doing, but typically the home and lock screen. So it could be the always-on display using more than normal. But still, after the same amount of cycles, it shouldn't drop as fast as it does. So as far as that part goes, it's a little bit odd, but some other people have suggested that Apple's using cheaper battery tech or different suppliers to reduce cost with the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max. I did a little post on Twitter or X the other day where I said my battery health was way down, and many people responded that they either had below 100%, some had 100%, but many did not. And this seems to be consistent this year compared to previous years, where the battery just seemed to actually last a little bit longer. Now, as far as how I charge, that may be changing, but let me tell you how I've been charging for many, many years. With the original iPhone, I would just plug it in at night, go to sleep, take it off the charger in the morning, and it was ready to go at 100%. Now, this is actually what Apple typically suggests you do when you're using the phone. We have optimized battery charging, which will hold the phone, learning your overall patterns, either based on alarms that you have set, and then charge it up to 80%, and then trickle charge it up to 100% by the time you wake up. That's what many battery manufacturers do, and different car manufacturers as well, such as Tesla, Rivian, and others. So they'll actually really charge it fast up to 80% and then slowly charge it to 100. But normally you hold it at 80 until maybe you want to use it a little bit more. So typically I'll put it on a MagSafe compatible charger. It's got all of the sensors. We'll put it on at night and then just charge it. And that's really what Apple pretty much designed it for. You've got new standby modes on iOS 17, and you put it on your nightstand and take a look at it that way. When you put it in landscape mode, it will switch into that mode. It takes a moment when it's charging and then switches into a new standby mode. And with that standby mode, you've got some additional information. So it's a super helpful thing, and that's how Apple intends it. However, you don't have to do that, and we'll talk about some other ideas a little bit later. And then also, like I said, I use it throughout the day with betas and more. Now, my wife charges the same way. I checked her phone, and it's down to 97% this year, charging the exact same way, just not using beta software. Now, as far as other things, I also wirelessly charge the phone in the car with a Qi-compatible charger, and I don't try and manage the battery typically. iPhone is designed to do that for you. However, there is one thing I typically do, and I don't let it drop below 10% battery. Typically, you don't want to do that over and over, as lithium-ion batteries don't like to be at 100% long or below 10% typically. You can charge them between about 10 to 90 or 20 to 80%, and they like to be in that range. When they're being stored, they like to be at about 50%. It's completely normal for them to get warm when charging, and that's another thing some people are concerned with, is using wireless charging warms up the phone. However, if you're not using the phone, it's pretty well managed by this, and this can actually reduce the power from 15 watts down to 5 watts if it needs to, based on overall temperature. So I'm not too concerned about wireless charging, as I've used it for many, many years since iPhone actually had that availability. Also, the other concern is charging bricks. I'll typically use an Anker charging brick or an official Apple charging brick, but some people that really want the optimal battery want to use lower power because that will trickle charge the battery slower and prolong it over time. Overall battery chemistry with lithium ion doesn't like to be fast charged over and over as much as far as longevity is concerned. So if you're using a 5-watt charger, you'll extend that battery life, but you'll also wait longer. So it's more of a convenience measurement, whether or not what you care about is battery life, is battery health over time, or charging it fast. It really depends on how you want to use it that way. There's also a couple things to note that if you want to avoid maybe ruining the battery faster, use that 5-watt charger, remove a case, like I said, and you can use your phone while charging it, but it can heat soak the phone over time, especially if you have a case on it. So you may not want to do that for a long time. Apple doesn't say you can't do that, but it will make the phone much hotter as the processor will produce heat as it's producing or processing different intense tasks such as games and more, and then it has to dissipate that heat. So it will pull the power down sometimes or even reduce the processor speed, pull the brightness down and more to try and keep that heat down. But if you're in a super hot environment, you may want to avoid doing that. Now, as far as the other thing, I've never used a case. And of course, if you want to bump this back to 100% battery health, all you need to do is change the battery. Apple offers this at an increased price this year, anywhere from $49 for the iPhone 5, $69 for all the iPhone SE generations, and iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and down to iPhone 5S, which is a little odd since it's similar to the iPhone 5, are $69. iPhone 10 all the way up to the iPhone 13 models is $89, and the iPhone 14 models are all $99. Once you replace that through Apple, it will bump that battery health right back up to 100%. Now, the point of this video is really to help you stop worrying about it, because there's nothing you can do until someone invents a better battery to stop it from degrading over time. It will always degrade over time. That's true with cars, that's true with phones, or anything that uses battery. So really, I would say don't worry about it too much. The iPhone was designed to operate on its own and be a tool to help and serve you, not you have to manage it. So a few things, like I said, you could do that if you want to manage it, but I really just recommend using it and enjoying it. Also, the battery health of my Apple Watch has been charged the exact same way, so I've used it exactly the same way, put betas on it and everything else. But if we go down to settings, let's find it here, go to settings, go to battery health, give it a moment. I am running betas on this, but on the Apple Watch Ultra, it's on the charger every single night the same way. And then if we go down to battery health, let's see what we're at 100%. So exactly charging it the same way. It just seems to be a better battery overall, and the software isn't pulling down that battery over and over. We can't see the charge cycles as there's no way to do that, but in general, it seems to be holding up fine. So there's a lot of different things you could do, but I really recommend just enjoying your phone and then replacing the battery if you need to. If you swap your phone every couple of years, I would just ignore it altogether. Unless you're in a super hot environment all of the time, maybe you'll want to take precaution there and maybe just charge it with a slower charger instead of fast charging, or just maybe not have a case on it while it's charging to help dissipate some of that heat. Now, I'd love to hear from you what you do to keep your battery health up. Do you manage it? Do you let iOS manage it? Let me know what you do in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you there. I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.